the last week in the Wall Street Journal, just on water systems around the country. Kind of, you know, keyed off on the Jackson, Mississippi one, but worth reading if you got any way to get to Wall Street Journal articles. But
can you imagine running a football program and water?
Yeah.
All those huge impact things we take for granted. Supposed to come out clean. We try to do that. We're supposed to trust them. Yeah, let's go away. But we already figured out on the other one. So we have a we do. Yes, all right.
Well, welcome everybody. It's 8:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get this meeting started. Call the Utility Policy Committee meeting to order for Thursday, September 8th. Wendy, would you mind calling the roll for us?
Mary Anderson.
Here.
John Crum.
Here.
Jim Escamilla.
Here.
Peter Hector.
Here.
Tom Lee.
Here.
Jeff Chamberlain.
Here.
Mark Elmer.
Here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next is setting our agenda. Are there any changes that we need to make to our agenda that's in front of us here? All right. Looks like we're ready to roll on it. I'm just going to hoping you do introductions. Hi, everybody. Appreciate you coming here to the meeting. So our next action item here is acceptance of the August 11th, 2022 draft minutes. Are there any changes that need to be noted on those minutes? All right. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes from August 11th then?
I'll move approval.
Motion made by Tom Wheat.
Second by Hefner.
Peter Hefner, support. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion passes. Now is the opportunity for public comment. It's not too formal as far as that goes, but is there anyone here who would like to make a comment? Is there anyone online? Comment? All right. Unfinished business. Yes. Okay.
Good morning. Is this okay for me to speak?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Decker.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I'm just excited to kind of hear what goes on in this meeting, especially when it comes to our water rates. So I'm excited to kind of hear what goes on here, and hopefully I'm hoping that I will be able to maybe one day be a part of this committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Decker. It's something many people dream about. All right, so now on to our unfinished business, Stantec contract approval update. Is that you, James?
Yes. Just to give an update, the City Commission approved the Stantec contract Tuesday night at the regular business meeting. So we'll be moving forward. There's a whole host of items that Stantec is available to work on should we assign it. Most probably exclusively right out of the gate would be rates, but there's also a whole lot of other things that we've talked about at the UPC level that we'll have them focus on and continue to support just a lot of this work that we have done.
Okay, thanks, James. James, are you up for the next thing then? Is that the water rates discussion update or?
Sure, I can give an update on that. We presented both drinking water rates and sewer rates to the City Commission for consideration for first reading on Tuesday night. We'll be having that brought back on September 19th for final consideration. Our recommendations are for 20% across the board for wastewater and 20% for water. we say across the board for wastewater because that just reflects kind of our immediate concern of bringing dollars into that fund, and that all rate classes and all rate tariffs, if you will, just we would apply 20% across the board to that. On drinking water, everybody's equal, so there is no differential between rates on drinking water. So the same concept will apply on drinking water, but yet it would just be a 20% increase. We would propose those to go into effect October 1st for wastewater and January 1st for drinking water. There was quite an engaged discussion with the city commission. There appears to be some, rather immediate concerns with affordability. That's something that my takeaway was that the city commission is really concerned with that. Certainly with these, large percentage increases. That's something that's on our agenda coming up. So I'll save that discussion.
Thank you, James. Yeah, Tom.
So it sort of rolls into the Stantec contract, because the Stantec contract of the RFQ sort of set forth a specific thing for them to do and set up rates for next year. But in that process, we had this emergency mid-year rate adjustment. So I guess the assumption is they're not going to do that whole process. You're going to change their scope of work over the next year and a half.
So over the next, roughly year and a half, or so to speak, kind of leading this up to our fiscal year 24 rate recommendation. So we've got, we've got some real estate, we've got some ball field in front of us to be able to move the offense, so to speak, and create a pretty concise rate package going forward. We've also got the water affordability plan. That's something that we're going to talk about today. We've got some team of engineers here to present that. And within that Stantec work scope is some integration of what the UPC and ultimately what City Commission would like to see within that water affordability plan to kind of create that network within the rate structure so that we could support a water affordability program. There's also some continued work focus. I know within some of the townships, we've talked about some of the connection fees that are a bit of a challenge. That's something that we've got scope to work. We've got the ability to work through that in the future. So that's some Stantec work scope as well.
Finish your question?
Yes.
Great. So just one other thing on water rates discussion, and at the city commission where this decision gets made, obviously it's not an engineering decision, it's a political decision by the time it boils down to that. And so, and the people, nobody calls in generally and says, hey, please increase my water rates. Doesn't happen. So you hear, 20% seems like a big number. And I have to say, we're in a situation where I think we've been very cavalier in a lot of ways about just the expectations we have for our water and wastewater systems. And the cost has really been so modest for so long. I would suggest that we just begin to think it just happens and it's not anything that should really be considered as an annual cost. And now we're moving more into that territory where people are beginning to see, okay, this is a real bill. Now 3-month bills go over, 3 digits, that sort of thing, more, and it feels more like a real bill. So I think part of our work here, not just the engineering side, but it's going to have to be on the narrative side also, and just the profound importance of these systems that we have in many ways ignored over time. So I don't know how that's going to play out. We don't hear, and maybe township people don't think about calling into the city commission much about this, and or feel like they have much say, but I would say we tend to mostly hear from city residents. And so I think we're going to have to be conscious also of this committee about telling the story and recognizing the importance. And certainly one of the things that one of the city commissioners brought up at the meeting, Chris Cradle, was talking about Jackson, obviously in the news right now. So Jeff Chamberlain is going to take this article, but I just want to recommend to folks, there's an article in their Wall Street Journal does this weekend, Saturday, Sunday paper, not just the Sunday paper, and their September 3rd, 4th paper, they had a front page article kind of starting off talking about the Jackson water crisis, but more so talking about the lack of investment in our water and wastewater systems across the country. And one of the things they mentioned in there is I think there's a decent sized water main break in this country every 2 minutes, basically that sort of thing. And across the country, it's not like anyone is in a unique position. We have been underinvesting in this kind of hidden infrastructure. So I think there's going to be concern about the affordability piece, and that's going to be something we're going to be talking about and addressing. But whatever realms we can think about here in our work, I think we're going to need to think about how we continue to, I guess, just be more public about the public health at its most basic level is supported by having these systems in place. We have just come to kind of expect that. So anyway, it was a good discussion. I think that from my perspective, I think it's likely that at our next meeting, when we take the action, it will be an action for these rates. But there's still going to be some discussion about it. And Commissioner Decker, I'm hoping you get an opportunity. You're a person who does a great deal of research. Looking at this Wall Street Journal article and just thinking about that together when we're doing all that. Water connections, extensions, and fees.
Just one question before we
Yeah.
proceed. Are you attending the meeting, the next meeting? Second reading?
I have not planned on when is the second meeting.
It's going to be 19th, right? Monday, the 19th is actually the night we actually vote on the rates. We just voted on Tuesday night to set the hearing date, which was Sunday.
And I'm just asking the question. I would suspect we should probably have someone in attendance, should there be a question.
Yeah.
That is not next week. Yes, I can probably make that.
Thanks.
So we should act, Tom, we were asking you to go there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
What's 7:00?
Meeting starts at 7. You can take advantage of public comment early on. I'm sure this will be after our consent agenda down to regular agenda. So depends on how many other comments we have before we'll get to this.
Just one note on what you just said. And I agree with everything you said in terms of the system and under funding. But the important thing for people to understand is the system that we're paying for, nobody else is paying for it but the users of the system. So you only get a system that's as good as what you pay for. And you know, we've been running this car for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's time to, it's got 120,000 miles on it, and you got to start repairing the parts and pieces. So I think that's crucial. Luckily, we get a few grants. Those are mainly geared towards the lead service replacement, mandate, but there's not a lot of money coming from outside the users. So
Right. I think one thing that's sometimes hard to think about is the scale too. There was a mention of this $1 million that had been obtained through earmark, right, from Fred Upton. You know, thank you for that work. But in the grand scheme of things, even though, wow, $1 million, can't we stop this? We got the $1 million credit. I mean, that's just really a drop in the bucket when it comes to all of it. So, water connections, extensions, and fees.
just work in process. I do look forward to working with Stanley on that. So they'll have, I'm sure, some valuable advice for us.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom.
Can I ask, what is the scope of that? I mean, what are you trying to do? You said those fees are.
So on the capital side, trying to understand what would be an equitable fee for people to pay as they connect to the system, so that all the capital improvement for expansions wouldn't be entirely on the rate side. With people who are having water built in front of them, have some fees they have to pay as well. It's really blending of the old model and the new model of the contract.
It doesn't matter whether it's your time and this side of the street versus time on the opposite side of the street, things like that.
No, that would be
Just the tavern fees.
Tavern fees, yeah.
So under the contract, it says that if there is an expansion, that this group can set the fee associated with connecting. So it's kind of a look, see at where do you go with that? Or do you go with that? But it does provide for, it's up to the UPC to say whether there is a associated cost with any expansion.
Give me some examples. I'm trying to get my head around this. So like, let's say you're at a lake house and you have to hook up. Is that what we're talking about? What? You're at a lake house that's or you know, you have a well and you have to tie in.
So the
It has nothing to do with that.
contract provides that if it's an expansion, the UPC can assess a fee for that connection. And the contract doesn't say that if there's already a pipe in front of your house, there's a connection. And so upon expansion, we're gonna need to have some knowledge of where we want to go with that. And there's also the thought that if there is a pipe in front of your house, is there a fee associated with it? It's not provided for in the contract.
And then how you deal with the development. Somebody builds 50 homes and other fees involved with each one of those houses, even though the developer is paying for the pipe. So there's, every time we think of something, figure it out, there's another thing. So,
Okay, right.
and so, yeah, the key is to try to make it equitable for the people in the system that are connecting, as well as the people in the system who are paying rates that are getting paid for part of that expansion or payback of past expansions. And so some of that goes back to people who understand rates and the financial side of the system.
Capital improvement program. Is that you, James?
Yeah, we continue to work with townships on developing a capital improvement program and, our own city crews or city engineers. Our city engineers have been working towards a fiscal year deadline to have all their capital improvement projects turned in to the director's office on September 9th. That then will go from internally included public services over to management services, and then that will be included in the fiscal year 23 budget. So that's, obviously there's a lot in that capital improvement program. It's pretty onerous, and then there's a lot of coordination with it too. Things like Lake Street project, things like our own White's and Weston project. One of the things that we've been talking about is water main procurement, seeing that it's 52 to 48 weeks off schedule. The city recognizing that, it's kind of taking that project delivery methods back to the table, drawing board, if you will, to kind of rescope what that would look like. So we've actually put together a bid package to bid out all the water mains so that we can buy the water main separate from the project. And as those projects are awarded and constructed in 23 and 24, that we provide the water main tool. But we just opened that bid yesterday, and results were very, very positive. So that bid opened up about $1 million below our engineer's estimate. So moving forward, it looks like we'll have water main. We're buying that water main now today so that it can be here next year to support next year's projects. And it looks like that was a very positive move. We're seeing that from pricing perspective. So that looks like we'll be able to continue to work forward in 2023.
When you're working through that capital plan, and you had shared with us a 5-year, I think it was 5 years.
Correct.
Well, when would we see that? Would that be like during the budget process or? Okay.
Yeah, so we'll bring that back. I think we're it's an ongoing thing. So we're always, if things come up like the pavilion expansion where we approve the upsize. So that cost for that upsizing, that's going to go into the capital plan for this year. So So every year through the budget process, kind of open that back up, realign our goals, reassess costs, reassess project priorities, and then put that into the budget. So every year there's an opportunity to get in there and move things around, so to speak, recognizing that it's a 5-year plan. There's also the larger 20-year plan that's on the UPC website that's under information and documents. So that's kind of a larger kind of guiding goal for us. And then that 5 years is more immediate, and then 1 year is kind of that action plan. And so, yeah, we'll have it, brought forward again. Or, UPC.
Like November or December.
Yeah, we could probably, we'll see the timing when we get it back out from our budget folks. Yeah, I think the fall is a fair estimate.
Any other questions on that? So although next item is the UPC appointment from the city, we do have an interested attendee today. So maybe if this seems like a very engaging meeting, so everybody step it up here a little bit, we'll have another commissioner who's interested in serving on the UPC here. Okay, status of the rate consultant, Beauchamp pre-approval.
We got information from James a couple weeks ago in terms of how to approach that, and that was forwarded to Mark. And I do know that he's working on it, so you should expect a submittal in the future year.
Great. City water utility financial reports.
That'll be quarterly.
Okay,
So I would ask James if we could get could I work with Steve or you, could I get those? I'll send you an email for the financial report I want to get.
Okay.
We talked about comparing 9 months to 9 months versus 1 year to 9 months. So I'll send you an email of what I would look for if those perhaps just after the end of the September month, and that'll give me a few days to put together something that we could share, and then we could tweak it.
Good, sounds fair.
Okay.
great. New business, utility financial policy, proposed updates.
There is not. So I was looking at that and we've approved the rate going forward. So we have a little time before we get to that need to address it.
Okay,
I think we were with the rate change, the target was to meet the bond covenants at this
Yeah.
point.
so James, are you up for the city water portability and feasibility report then?
Yes, yeah, we'll go ahead and present on that. So within your packets.
I'm sorry.
And I would like to do full disclosure. I worked at Prime Newhoff. Prime Newhoff the city hired Prime Newhoff to do this rate affordability study.
Okay,
So Brian and Nicole with Prime Newhoff out of Grand Rapids office.
all right, appreciate that.
There it is.
But yeah, certainly, thanks for the introduction. Tom, just to give perhaps a little bit of a broader introduction, back in 2021, City Kalamazoo was awarded a water affordability research grant through EAGLE. And that allowed us to retain professionals that could take, look at this work, provide some recommendations. So there's a lot of work that went into this to create some baseline recommendations and some pathways to move forward. And so that's kind of what we have. We'll turn it over. Again, we've got Brian and Nicole from Grand Rapids office, Brian and Nicole, to kind of walk us through this.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I'm going to sit up here so I can clip slides. And my name is Brian Villamont, Brian and Newhoff. As Tom mentioned, we're under the same roof, but we have done this project separately. Really, Tom hasn't been involved in the compilation of this draft report for you. I know in the packet and in the cover letter, the transmittal of the draft, we explained a lot, but I'll go through a couple brief background items just for the benefit of the audience here. About a year ago, the state of Michigan issued a series of grants, and one of them was an affordability planning grant. In this case, the city of Kalamazoo, I worked with Kalamazoo staff to put together a work plan and a proposal for that. It is a 100% grant that was awarded to the city for this, and the state's intent was to provide people with dollars to investigate options for creating affordability programs. There were, I think, around 40 or 50 different recipients. Most of the recipients of the grant have been using their grant dollars to do rate studies, in essence, examine their own systems and look at this rate affordability. And we took a little bit of a different tack with it, of examining not just what the rate impacts are, but looking at all the different options. What are existing resources in the system? What are other people doing, both locally, statewide, and nationally, for affordability programs? We really cast the information net pretty wide to try to gather as much information as we could to give you guys the options of seeing what are other folks doing in not only the state and the nation, but see what options there are for you locally. The intent of this report, because it is draft, is not to present this is absolutely what you should do. We are really asking for your review of all the information and your comment on what really might best fit the Kalamazoo area system. That's really the intent. So again, it's been about a year since we started this. It's been a long slog of gathering a lot of information at first. Trying to gather information on affordability is difficult. If any of you have tried or helped anybody try to work through affordability issues for anything in their household, getting assistance is not easy. And I think that's one of the things we try to address in the report as well, is how do we help consolidate and get the best bang for our buck if you decide to move forward with an affordability program? How do we make it as effective as possible? And recognizing that when we talk about affordability, yes, we talk about water and sewers linked to that, but many times, and is most often the case, people who have chronic affordability issues aren't just dealing with the water and sewer rate. They're dealing with their car, they're dealing with their rent, they're dealing with gas, groceries, all these other basic needs costs are affecting them. Now, does that mean we shouldn't do anything from a water and sewer rate perspective? No, absolutely not. We need to try to take care of the piece of the pie that we can, and then if we can create a system that also helps them, helps those folks who need it have access to other programs. Because the goal, I think, is really twofold. If you have a delinquency issue, we need to get people out of delinquency, which is getting them out of the hole to begin with. The second is trying to keep them out of the hole, because the system as a whole benefits from that. So when we talk about water affordability, that is one piece of the big overall puzzle. I know earlier you guys mentioned that this isn't just our problem. We have to deal with costs in our system. Just to give you a little bit of an order of magnitude, the state of Michigan has a state revolving fund, a low interest loan program for doing sewer and water projects. This past application cycle for the 2024 fiscal year, there was an ask across the state of over $900 million from the state for the low interest loan program. Now, initially, the state only had about $230 million in that fund to fund those loans. There's a huge influx of other Fed money that has come in, of course, that has funded another huge chunk of it, but they still can't fund all of it. So just so you understand that the need for water replacements and water work is not just statewide, but it's nationwide. And it's a huge need. So again, it just exemplifies that you guys aren't on an island by yourself. It's across the board. And it's really important to still try to manage your system as best you can. So with that, yeah. Any questions just generally on the grant itself? Okay, I appreciate that. So a couple of the big concepts that we have in the affordability program is what is water affordability? And this is also, it's in the report. The report goes into much more detail, of course, about this. But the concept is that you should be able to meet basic needs. And what are basic needs? And a good example is HUD, when they do look at a home, they think that you need a working kitchen sink, working toilet and bathroom sink, and a working cover shower. Those are basic. And the idea being in our society, our first world, those should be the basic needs that we want to strive for every home. It's not having people walk 5 miles to the nearest, public fountain to fill up buckets of water and carry it home. That's not how we're hoping to have our level of service work in our system. So it's making sure that we have a common understanding of what we determine to be affordable and what that means and what basic needs. We looked at chronic bill delinquency. So we talked about affordability, and again, this map is also in the report. What this map shows is several things we'll talk about. I'm sorry, it's small on the screen, but in essence, what this is the colors on the map indicate different income levels by census tract. So this is from U.S. Census data, and it shows the level of incomes in each of the census tract areas in our area. The heavy black line is the city limits. And then in there, I know it's hard to see on the screen, it's a little easier in your report, but there are white dots that show chronic delinquencies. And by those, we mean accounts that are over 90 days delinquent. And as you can see the dots on that map, they are all over. They aren't just concentrated within the city. There's people that are delinquent outside the city in various areas of the service district. So I think it's important to recognize that it's not just a concentrated problem, it's a system problem. And then also on this map, we've given just a little bit of an idea, benchmark of where things are at. So when you look at the federal poverty level of 101 to 130%, that's a $34,450 per year income, which is in essence 2 people living on minimum wage. So if you have 2 income earners, 2 minimum wage income earners, that let's say they have 2 kids, that's where they're at right now. So again, there are various reasons for delinquency. You could have delinquency because someone moved and just didn't pay a bill, and so it's sitting out there for a long time. Or you could have people that have true income issues. And the idea is that it's very important to not ignore those as a system. You have to deal with them. And it is a system issue. It's not just concentrated in any one area. As you can see, there's gray areas outside the city that are greater than 250% of the federal poverty level. So you're talking over $66,000 of annual income. There's still delinquencies out in those areas. That's important, I think, to recognize that it's really a system-wide thing. So who benefits from assistance? Pretty much anyone who is in the water, who is a water and or sewer customer can apply, is the idea behind this concept. So it's not just any one area, it's the entire system. Additionally, not only do the individuals who qualify for this, and it would be income qualifications, the entire system benefits because you can gain some economic stability. There's also a staff issue, and I guess I asked that you kind of put yourself in the position of a water service staff person that has to go out and perform a shutoff. And talking with James, this is really hard on the staff. Would you like to go to someone's house and start turning off that water valve? And granted, for whatever reason that they haven't paid their bill, they still come out and say, look, I've got 2 kids in this house. I've got family that need this water, and you're turning it off right now. That's very stressful. It's very hard on your staff. So there's that aspect of it. Plus, there's the simple time constraint of it. But doing all these water shutoffs takes time. If they do come back online and pay their bills, then we still have to have staff go out and turn them back on. So there's a cost to the system, regardless of time cost and resource cost, to deal with shutoffs and shut-ons. Also, generally, if you have fewer households in distress, if that's one less worry they have, generally that creates less anxiety for people. It helps lower volatility in neighborhoods. There's a general benefit to decreasing the amount of stress people have. And again, we're only talking about dealing with water and sewer here at the moment, but as you read through the report, one of the things that's very important is we're looking at an option that you can team with Community Action Agency as part of this, which again, they have access to a lot of other assistance programs sewer issues, we also get them to the table and maybe deal with other issues in their home. So again, it's leveraging this potential assistance of this program with other programs that we're doing. So look at who needs assistance. Again, this is pointing out just about minimum wage. And basically the idea is if you earn a minimum wage here in Michigan and you look at what average expenses are, it's really hard. As a single person, the numbers don't shake out. You can't do it. You have to combine resources with someone to make it work. And again, utility delinquency can come from a lot of different things. It could be low initial income. It could be loss of an income. Someone loses a job or an unexpected expense. You have a medical expense. You trip and twist your ankle and you've got a $600 medical bill. Well, show me in that budget where that $600 medical bill fit. It doesn't. So as soon as you have an unexpected expense, that your family budget gets broken. And it's almost impossible to fix. So again, the idea is we need to figure out how to address these kind of things and leverage assistance where we can. The plan that we put forth, the draft, and there's some recommendations in there. The idea is that it is an income-based plan. So it's not someone who is just not paying their bill. There has to be a proven need. And the report also goes into a lot more detail of why we thought we teamed with Community Action Agency. And this is, we talked about this here. When we looked at different programs that are out there, we took quite a note, I think, from the east side of the state or Great Lakes Water Authority there, that they are teaming with Community Action Agency because they found out that their organization, Great Lakes, is not nimble enough to deal with local issues on a township by township and small regional basis. So they ended up teaming with Community Action Agency, who already has an intake process, already has an evaluation process, already has access to many other assistance programs, and that's a great way to leverage both the advertising you have and helping those that might need it. Sorry, I know it's a lot of information to digest. The report's fairly large. Again, I'm not asking you guys to have digested all of that today. We just want you to, this is a brief introduction to some of the major concepts that plan talks about, and to have you take a look at those. But again, we really believe that linking to CA is helpful. One option would be for to use existing staff, whether it's city staff or township staff, as intake evaluators. We didn't think it was a very efficient way of doing it, since CAA already does that. They already have a process. They already have a system. We just need to, I think, maybe make it a little more accessible. But I think this, again, as I mentioned, gets the best bang for your buck. If you're going to provide support, it gives people who might really need it and prove that they need it through income-based qualifications, that there's other assistance available. And we've also, as part of the grant, we're doing some home inspections as well, looking at people who have been chronically delinquent. We've got a few residents who volunteered to let us come in and take a look around the house and do an audit. And that audit involves looking at not just water, so we're looking for dripping faucets, leaking toilets, plumbing repairs that are needed, but also looking at the other things in their house. Do they have energy issues? Do they have leaky windows? Do they have insulation problems? Do they have other things, repairs that are costing them? And I think that's one of the hard parts about a lower income housing is this typically older housing stock. And if any of you own an older house, you know it simply costs more to repair those. They break down more frequently. So again, you take folks who are already in a lower income bracket, putting them in a house that costs more to live in, it's another resource that pulls away from them. So oftentimes water delinquency, water and sewer delinquency isn't just because the water and sewer bill is so unaffordable. It's because there are so many other costs in their life that are pulling them away, pulling their resources away from paying the water sewer. And I think that's an important thing to do. We looked at rate impact. So this is one issue. So currently, the delinquency, chronic delinquency varies year to year. But when we looked at the 2018 data was the most solid, only because it was pre-COVID. COVID, of course, messed up a lot of things because we had moratorium on shutoffs and different things like that. So delinquencies were weird. But the around $300,000 in chronic delinquency. Now, granted, that 300,000, not all of those people will probably be able to prove that they're income qualify. Again, there may be people who have moved and just not paid their bill. There may be other things, people who can pay who just haven't for whatever reason. So that 300,000 will probably be a bookend for now. But assuming that all of that were chronic delinquencies that were income-based issues, if we were to fund that through water sewer rates, there's a potential rate impact of, just around 0.5% for sewer water. Now, granted, there are some people who are on water but not on sewer, and vice versa. That all those details will get worked out as far as how that gets charged. But this is a broad brush look at what's the ballpark general impact. So again, if you were to fully fund a $300,000 a year affordability program, it would be about 0.5% in rate impact. It's also important to note that if you had an affordability program in place, you could take advantage of a lot of other resources. For instance, I think it's LIWAP that the feds have brought in. It's a new current Fed program that's helping to pay for delinquencies. So in essence, the Fed money is used to wipe out a lot of delinquencies, which is really helpful for the system. It's outside money that's coming in. Again, if you have an affordability program that's in place, it makes access to that money so much easier. Basically gives you guys a place for that money to land much easier. It's currently administered through the action agency, but again, if let's say you were currently partnered with them already with an affordability program, all the folks in your system would have much easier access to it, and they'd already be income qualified probably through other systems. So again, having it there gives you the ability to take advantage of other programs that come along with outside money. So that's a lot to consider, I know. But I think if you look at some of the examples we gave of different programs, it's across the country. We've looked at, there's a big program in Philadelphia, Arizona. They've done some things to try to deal with water delinquency, and there's things that they can do out in the drier, warmer climates that we can't here because we have winter to deal with and don't have as much access to meters. But the idea being that it's the big issue is not an overuse or a wasting of water. The issue really is a matter of income and trying to help those in our system meet basic water needs. And that's really the decision that you guys, the big decision you need to make is that something you want to address in the calendar area system?
Brian, I think just a few points, kind of just hit on some high points. We talk about need qualification or income qualification. The report identifies ALICE as kind of that benchmark. And so those that are, maybe familiar with ALICE, maybe not, that's asset limited, income constrained, employed. And so those are folks that are out there hardworking, have a job supporting their life and family, but they may not qualify for a lot of the conventional things that are set around the federal poverty level, so that sort of thing. Generally speaking, ALICE has historically been about 250% of federal poverty, and so it's a number that's a little bit higher. But within this program, we would recommend using those ALICE, income rate tables for families as everything else. Another thing that's in the report is we talked about water shutoffs and the challenge that we have right now. We're going to continue in 2023 of not doing shutoffs. And with the affordability program, we'd like to bring shutoffs back under a managed approach. And so what we saw from the overlay of the map is that it's not a direct relationship between ability to pay and actually making a payment. So we've got folks that through census tract data would indicate that they have the financial resources to pay water. So we need something in place. And if we bring back a managed approach to shutoffs, where we're going out and working with the community action agency, we're having, say, a social worker make that phone call for that shutoff to say, hey, family, are you aware that you're on the shutoff list? You're going to be shut off if we don't get you signed up. So if we get the family signed up and active in the water affordability program, then we would not shut off. But if we've got, we've made that contact, hey, we'd like to sign you up for a water affordability program, or you pay your water bill. And we go through that process, we understand they have the income, they have the needs, they're just not doing it, we shut that off. So the advantage of bringing the shut-off program back is that it does restore some, kind of checks and balances and accountability back within the water utility. So the people that have the ability to pay, you've got that, kind of a carrot and stick approach. The other point that Brian was talking about in terms of interior plumbing is that we'd like to bring in some interior plumbing and home repair aspect to the water affordability program. So that if folks have inefficient fixtures, or they've got leaking pipes, or perhaps even if they have lead fixtures, that there would be a pathway to get that covered. And then some work that we're going to have to do with Stantec, some work that we're probably going to have to do with city attorney, is that we've got to continue to make sure that the program that we propose, we can fund it through rates, or we've got an established funding program in place long-term, and that it's, legal, and it passes all muster and everything else. So we talked about $300,000 for, the direct rate assistance, but we also need to identify funding for the plumbing, critical plumbing repairs. We do have some legal opinions. They're included within this report. It's a little bit of a complex consideration under Michigan law, so there's probably some further work that would have to be taken on that once we kind of, once we narrow down the funnel of where we're actually ready to. So that's just some highlights there, and we're all ready to take comment, discussion from UBC.
Questions?
I have a few. For Director Baker, on the $300,000, that 0.5%, is there late fees attached to that, or is that just a set rate? So, I mean, is the city in a position, if we're using a funding mechanism to help those delinquent accounts, that there would be an expungement of the late fee then, because it's paid out of another account then for that. And then Director Baker and I have had some comments and conversations over the course of time on this practice for the group's information. I've been in that seat, pulled up to the house. Happens to be his birthday, has a broken leg, he's got 3 kids at home, it's the middle of the summer, and hasn't paid his water bill in a year and a half. Doesn't like to see you, doesn't have anything good to say to you. Then let's go through the scenario that I can't quite find the surface box to shut off because we've had small alterations on a driveway or a sidewalk or a tree. And then the expense for the city becomes far greater than a simple fee schedule would suggest. If we charge about $50 to go turn off, $50 to turn back on. I mean, those fees are set for somebody who may want to go to Florida for the year or for the winter and not have, the water turned on for the house, but they really don't represent the true cost of performing the action of actually shutting off when you are now out there with a mini excavator or a backhoe ordering up concrete. I think the city also, in my opinion, needs to look at a different methodology rather than time in the field for staff out there to shut out delinquent, but potentially look at applying it to the tax base as we're legally allowed to do to collect the utility back as well. Once we've exhausted the opportunity to provide help to the individual who truly shows need. So the idea of taking care of faucets, toilets, plumbing internally to stop leaks, to help conserve water, to keep the rate, to keep the bill down for the homeowner is a good thing to look at. But I also think there becomes added expense at times chasing this, and I hate to minimize it, but it is 0.5% to the entire rate or budget for revenue coming in. And how hard are you going to chase that? be chasing it at a harder level of putting staff in the field. Better locations for service boxes going forward with lead line service replacements will solve some of those problems for us to locate them, but in fact, in Fort City, where they've been in the ground for a while or it could be out, country where we've decided to plant a tree in the curb lawn area. I had no idea that the service box was there and it's down buried into the roots of the base of the tree. So it's some food for thought for the group as well as it's more than just how do we get return on $300,000 in delinquent accounts, but how do you go about it in a method that have a less economic impact on the city as well, from a day-to-day operational standpoint. My math says it's about $600 a household. Just under $50 a month bill. Is where this kind of lays once, those 500 people out of 0.5% of that. So you have to do the math to figure out the customer base of that. But again, a small piece of the puzzle, maybe some more outside the box thinking, rather than just go back to a shut off policy.
No, John, I think you got a lot of great points there. First, on the late fees within the program structure outline, that's one of the things that we're proposing to eliminate. It's just the late fees are seen as an additional burden on that customer that's gone into arrears. And, I'm not going to get into the justification of the utility aspect of it, but once we've crossed over that cliff, the late fees aren't helping out the situation. That's also something that, when we look at all the program structure elements, and there's many of them, and looking at something like late fees, is that something that, we could look at eliminating that in 2023? Are there program elements within here that we can develop some quick wins and implement before we're ready to implement the whole thing in 2024? So I don't know the answer to that. That's just some questions, for perhaps for our staff internally, even that we can make through city manager determinations. Some things I know that would probably be some viewed positively by the city commission on some of these things that we continue to challenge our customers with increased rates. If there's some quick wins that we can borrow out of the affordability program and implement at a faster pace. In terms of the shutoffs, John, you obviously have experience with this. There's a huge emotional toll doing water shutoffs, and every one of us in the water department has our own personal stories of the hurt you're bringing to a family, or the hurt you're experiencing or seeing, or sometimes hurt turns to violence. We've had violence on our staff because of water shutoffs, and it's something that if you've been in our department long enough, you'll have those stories. And I think that goes with the territory. The other part of it that we were really seeing kind of leading up to our cessation of water shutoffs during COVID was the real actual structural cost of performing the shutoff. So if we've come out to do the shutoff and the curb box is under the sidewalk, or we've got to cut down a tree to get to it, we could spend somewhere in the ballpark of $1,500 to $3,000 in real cost to shut water off, and then come out 2 days later and turn it back on. And there's a problem with that. We've got to look at some of those methods, and out of the gate, just stopping the shutoffs stops that work. We've done a lot of lead service. My analogy within the department was, hey, let's go out and replace the lead service line instead of going out and doing all that work. Then we could internally, the cost is about the same on some of those cases. And by state law, if I go out to do a shut off and it's a lead line, I can't touch it because I can't dig up the sidewalk, dig up the curb box, the lead line, and shut the water off. That's a no-go for us. we gotta address that. So the lead timing was also a component of this as well. Good news, East Kalamazoo, that's completely done. We're completed with that lead service line project. So all the services in that area, new curb box, everything's ready to go. And as we work across the system to the west, as we work across the system to the south, in time, we'll have all those removed. So a lot of great points, and we appreciate the perspective.
Spitballing a thought, is there an opportunity to promote, maybe on the water bill, help your neighbor, for $1 contribution to a, to a fund that helps for those that are delinquent, in your neighborhood, 0.5% on a rate for some people with, $5 in a neighbor, from one person who's able to meet the bill consistently over the course of time. If they could donate $5 a year, I think we probably have a methodology to try to find opportunity as well for communal assistance. Now, I only raise that because I'm looking at this from the standpoint, it's tough to set rates to say we want to increase rates another, let's say 0.5% to self-fund helping a delinquent. So we're back to those who are cautious on using words. The customers that pay their bill consistently and on time that are not on the delinquent list, the less than 500 that are represented with $300,000, they're given an opportunity to help. That becomes easier on the rate opportunity rather than pushing an additional to self-fund. Again, just trying to throw ideas out for thought process as this community tries to find its way where we go and what we do.
I think one of the things that is addressed a little bit in the report, we do have a few things in there that talk about there's the options for doing a rate adjustment to help support the program. There's the option of adding, in addition to rate support, you can add the voluntary contribution, again, promoting that civic responsibility or that civic duty that people have. So that's another piece of it that can come into play. I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about this $300,000 delinquency, again, the idea that assistance would be provided to those who prove that they have economic challenges. So this is not a program that is intended to just get anybody and everybody out of delinquency. So you have to show that there's a real income need there. And that's a really important factor, because you're not just bailing out people who aren't paying their bill. You're not just bailing out people who forgot to pay their bill. You're trying to help people who have true long-term annual income challenges. I think that's a differentiator as well. So we have to be careful that when we talk about helping those that are delinquent, it's helping those that are delinquent that do have true income challenges.
I hope there's a focus as well, though. So today I may be able to qualify under whatever criteria you put in front to measure whether or not I'm capable for assistance. So today I may be able to, but because of COVID for 2 years, I got behind. And I can't get over the hump of this that I owe, but going forward, I probably could. So maybe this time, going to raise rates that we look for the method to put everybody on an equal playing ground and clean it all up from a delinquent standpoint because of what COVID did and impacted us, in the water sector that municipalities could not shut off.
Yeah.
That's that.
Yeah, I forgot there's the
Part of
portal.
our delinquencies are just wiped out with the Sarah program.
Okay.
So we don't have long-standing delinquency. The few that are out there, we're rolling over the tax. I know Mr. Cindy probably on our call is in the process of turning some delinquents over to the tax.
And to part of that too, James, I'm sorry, I failed earlier to introduce Nicole Dyer from our team that's also on this, has done a ton of work, and Teresa Johnson from the city, we've been coordinating a lot. And those two have done a ton of work also in looking at what some options are, talking with the action agency, dealing with the new fed out of the LIWAP program that'll help hopefully eliminate a lot of the mentioned, for those folks that might qualify, it doesn't make sense to heap fees on top of someone that's already in a hole. So again, for those delinquent accounts that would be meet eligibility, getting rid of the fees so that we can stretch those live off dollars farther. And so that the live off dollars aren't just paying for fees, they're actually paying through water use, sewer use, delinquency. Those are all exactly your correct things that need to be part of that.
Just out of curiosity, I saw a headline, I didn't read the article, but Detroit just launched a new program. Any ideas on how that works? I know they made a big fanfare out of launching a big program recently here.
Yeah, Nicole's been looking into that as well. Go ahead.
Great.
Go on over here.
I put you on the spot, sorry.
You're not in the speaker, so you gotta yell a little bit.
Yeah, so Detroit was under the RAP program, but they moved away and started their own program called the Lifeline Plan. And the program that, the RAP program, which has been around for at least 5 years now, was giving a $25 a month to people that qualify. But this new plan that the city is under now is based on your income. So that a certain percentage of your income you'll be paying. So it could be as low as $18 a month.
So you're correct, Jeff. The idea being that in Detroit, so that in the city of Detroit, they're doing an income-based rate. So you're only paying a certain percentage of your income based on whatever your income is. So they're not setting a water rate based on a dollar amount for the service. They're based on what percentage of your income you are going to pay for that water service. So a very different concept. And again, that's just started in.
I think some of those may have philanthropy involved, and I know part of the discussion that we have to have is ongoing assistance. So if we create a program that is really solely dependent on one set of philanthropy, if that goes away, then the program goes away. So I think part of the work is how do you set up a program that's ongoing and is sustainable for, into the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think really this work is focused on getting away from, pulling out that cheap commercial office of the 10 different churches that have agreed to fund water assistance this month and running through that we want to get to a structured program that's in place that's sustainable long term. And that really the only firm true way to get there is to control the destiny through rates. And so that's really where we're pushing to get the majority of this program funded through the rate structure. So there's still options with that. This would come laid out, there's ideas, there's some further review by Mr. Richard Cherry, that's opinion provided with the document, those are the details of that. But that's a great point. I think it's very well taken in that if we're going to do this work and create this plan, we've got to have that structure in place to ensure that it has the ability to do it itself.
And again, speaking to the sustainability, again, I know I mentioned we really recommend if you move forward with something like this, that we partner with community action agencies. They have so much of the staffing and intake infrastructure and systems infrastructure already in place. They're state funded. And what's nice about that program is that currently there's a lot of momentum on the state level to look at overall household costs. And so community action agency is starting to get more and more resources to help things like energy efficiency. And if you can help someone deal with their heating bill and make their house more efficient, it gives them a little more income to be able to apply towards other bills, whether it's food or gas or utilities. So again, trying to address the affordability issue from a larger picture issue than just simple water and sewer rates, I think is a big key. And partnering with community action agency, we've had several meetings with them. They are set up, they're willing to do this if it's something you want to move forward with. They have the staff to do that. Again, part of the program, if you guys implement that, there would be a little bit of funding money that has to go to them to pay for some of that staff time. But again, you're not hiring your own staff to do it. You're paying for part-time of someone who's already hired and already doing that process. So again, it's a very efficient way of trying to help folks in the towns with water systems.
Thanks, Brian. Any other comments or questions from utility policy committee members?
On the slide you have that showed the $150,000 delinquency. You know, you show $150,000 compared to $52 million and say it's 0.5%.
Oh,
That delinquency is a point in time for a certain group of people or 100% of delinquencies?
correct.
Which,
Yeah, that's a 2018 one
Yep.
time, and that is 100, that's all of the residential chronic delinquencies. Yeah, and
so would you need to multiply that by 4 quarters to come up with what it actually would cost you to pay their bill?
oh no, that's the annual. I'm sorry,
Okay,
that is the
okay.
annual. Yep. And as I mentioned, it doesn't bet out why they were, like whether, we don't know.
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
just forgot
totally.
about that. So it's simply, we try to create some kind of a measure of, okay, ballpark, what could this be? And I think in reality, if of the 300,000, I don't know how many people would actually income qualify in that group, but it's something less than 300,000. And you're correct, year to year, that may change as things like if we have a live off, that maybe wipes out a large chunk of that, that would go down for a year or so, maybe over years it creeps up. That, again, the program is gonna have to have some flexibility, and I think as we see from the examples in Detroit, where they had the RAP program, and now they're trying this other program, or even before that, when they were administering themselves and then decided to use CAA, there has to be acknowledgement that we're gonna need to be a little flexible, a little agile in how we deal with it, but we have to have a start. So it's the best we could get with the data we have.
Another question for you. So this would be the annual theoretical fee. I just wanted to find out in the Kalamazoo region here, and I don't know how your policy works, but is it that if there's a piece of property that is rented to an individual, there's some type of certification that that individual will pay the water bill and it can't be put on property taxes? Is there such a process here? Do you know, James?
I would have deferred to Teresa, our deputy director, to kind of go into detail.
No, okay.
It always goes to a
Maybe
lease.
you refer to that.
It always goes to a lease.
So everything goes to the lease.
Even if it's in the lease is where you'd see it,
Yeah,
who has to pay the water bill.
yeah.
But ultimately, it's the property owner is responsible.
I think there's some places where they actually have some certification that it relieves that, and I didn't know how you work, so I totally understand that. The community action agency component, would that be just, they would assess who's eligible and notify the water department that these folks are eligible? Is that the concept?
Correct, the idea being that they would be the intake process.
Yeah.
So they would take those folks and get all their information, which again helps them, they can use that qualifying information for a lot of other programs, if that makes sense. The other being that, yes, we can set the term, the idea is every 6 months, community action agency would provide a list to the city of Kalamazoo for billing purposes of who qualifies for the assistance program.
Can they tell you now who qualifies before? I mean, they're obviously working with other people on other programs. Do they say, yeah, that's the ballpark, or?
They don't have any correlation between our delinquency list and their intake right now. So they don't know, they can't say of the people that they've qualified for
Right,
assistance. There hasn't been a comparison of that list of people that qualified to, are those people on the delinquency list?
Right, is there a way for them to give you data to say, these are how many would qualify at this dollar amount that we know of already? Because folks may qualify for this that aren't, they are paying their bills, right?
Right.
And now they may not need to, right? They may already be, they may already be eligible for it, they just don't not pay their bills.
I don't know,
So
and I
it
don't
could be,
know.
it might be
So-
worth the
So I
information.
think
now.
one thing to recognize, I guess, is I don't think you're ever going to create the perfect system that catches every single thing and makes every single situation 100% equitable all the time.
I'm not saying that. I just wondered if they could give us data to say, at this level, we already know of X. They may or may not participate,
Yeah.
you know?
We could ask them what if they have, we give them a geographic area,
Yeah.
how many people that they have in that area that would meet the potential qualification. We can ask them.
And also, I know of a program, it's called community development block grant. Has there been any thought of, I work with a lot of municipalities. And they will go out and, let's say, put a new furnace in a house for somebody who's elderly, the new roof, they paint them, they do all kinds of things. Has there been any thought that, you know, for the repair aspect, that would be utilized? Or, you know, I mean, it's sitting there.
We've run those programs for decades.
Yes,
The
yes.
Kalamazoo region.
Yes, yes. And all the townships actually participate in them in one way or another. Or the thought is, no, we will do this correctly, ratepayers.
So I think all those kind of income sources and assistance sources are on the table as part of this. And again, the intent of the draft report was to provide an initial framework to say, okay, here's a good starting point. And absolutely, there are things that you guys, if you decide to go forward, that you can add to that as well.
Thanks very much, Brian. Any other questions for just at this time? I really, really appreciate that effort. So, Jerry, that's something.
In our building process, I have some problems with how you do the continuous light. There's no way to keep records with somebody. You might have a cop 1 year or medical something, but you find this person does it year after year after year, and there's nothing on the building for me to keep track long term how it's going with this person. The penalties, we have people that are just lazy, they don't pay, not time, or don't want to pay. And I find that keeping track of them and that costing more than all my good ones that just pay regularly on time and everything. And some of these are not low income. I have an example of a person who's 5 quarters late paying me. They don't want to pay, they want me to put it on their taxes and pay it all at one time instead of paying. They rent houses, but they don't want, haven't ever paid for 5 weeks. And then, so how much penalty do the city get? What do they do with the payment?
Well, and I think that whole system is, although it's a small, I think it's a part of the discussion of affordability, but that kind of a problem is different than an affordability problem. That's a delinquency, just a straight delinquency problem, and a good question. And it's still something that has to be addressed, but I think maybe that becomes part of a tangent discussion and parallel with the affordability issue.
So thanks again. So just related to all that, what is our responsibility and what's the time frame and how we will be involved in this? Do you want to talk about that thing?
Yeah, we'd like to give you at least another meeting, so, at least another meeting, and then, let's take you through October, and we would ask for some final comments by November. And then that would give us the ability to take some concise direction from UBC. We'll take that back, we'll work with Stantec, we'll work with, Connie Newhoff to get us submitted to Eagle, and so that we can get Eagle approval, on this, and then, recognizing that depending on how we implement, it's a lot of stuff here to policy, procedure, script, and get worked out to where, you know, Monday morning of January 1st, 2024, we're ready to pick up the phone and have the affordability phone. So this is a huge lift. We do recognize UBC's input and give UBC some time to do that, but we will be asking for final recommendations, final comments, as you know.
Okay. And then ultimately those comments come along, but it's a city commission action then?
Correct. There'll be city commission action as we move to implement the program. There'll be rate implications of the field. So there'll be future, I can't tell you when at this point, there will be future city commission action on these topics.
Any other final thoughts on that? All right.
Thank you very much. I know we're taking a big chunk of your time, but it's a big issue. Again, thank you very much.
Thanks for thinking about this. Hey, I know we already got the agenda approved here. We didn't have anything else under new business. We're down to comments. So we have a couple invoices to approve. And that wasn't on the agenda. So if we could just jump to that now, is that okay? I've got 2 invoices, Ty Newhoff and one from Peter.
My website. it gets in it. early this week.
Yours didn't make it into the. Okay,
I was just sending mine to Wendy to put in the packet.
Yeah.
Probably just when you get it, send it to Wendy and she can put it in the packet.
okay.
You didn't get it. You didn't get it.
All right, so the first invoice is from Kalamazoo. Can I have a motion from someone into for the payment of this invoice?
I would make that motion.
Okay, is there support?
I'll second that.
I will be abstaining. You will be abstaining, okay. So, motion made and supported. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. And then, Peter, we got one from Redevelt, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Redevelt Hefner, LLC. So there's that invoice in front of us as well. I have a motion on paying that invoice.
I'll make a motion to make that payment.
Tom?
I'll
I'll
support that one.
For John?
I will abstain.
Please abstain. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Both the invoices are approved for payment. I believe we're at the place on our agenda for committee member alternates, attendees, and guest comments. Anything? Members of the board?
Yeah, as a part of you on the state drive.
So wrapping up, Stadium Drive should be the next home game, the big home game. We're planning that. And so there's some incremental closures. We're under directional closure right now as we're just wrapping things up, getting the heck out of there so that. I believe Park View is around the first. It is really close, almost there.
I got turned around yesterday. According to that time.
So it's the price of progress, right?
That's what I say too.
Anything else from policy committee members? Anyone yet? Yes.
Lucianne from Oshtemo Township. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the information from Brian this morning. I also appreciated the information from Mr. Baker. And while we all understand, what's going on in the bill today, bills are a concern to people. We hear it about the sewer and water as well. And certainly understand and respect those that have problems. I know, just as another brief quick comment, Jeff and I faced this with the city water expansion project due to PFAS. And a lot of comments that I would get from people are, I don't want, a quarterly water bill. And so some of it was an education process as well, because people kind of assume that if you're on well septic, you don't have a monthly bill, but you really do. So I think that component is important in the communication process as well, because it takes electricity. And you also have to set money aside for capital improvements. So the cost to put in a brand new well septic is huge today. So I think that can be a good communication piece as well.
Appreciate that. Anyone else?
I just got one quick question. The meeting at the city commission, next city commission, discussed some rates. Is that first reading of the ordinance? Or is that Saturday?
So I didn't.
Is that first or second reading of the water and sewer rate ordinance?
The 19th.
On the 19th, so that's the meeting where we'll vote.
That is.
Yeah, so we set that as our hearing date. We did have a committee of the whole meeting on it, which is a public meeting also. So we really, this will have 3 meetings on the topic. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? It's a pleasure to have our solid audience members that show up for this and participate. Means a lot, as this is a public meeting. So anything else, James, for good of the order? Yes, sir. Oh, there's somebody, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying thank you. Goodbye. Appreciate the discussion.
Nice to see you, Libby. All right, see no one else, then we're adjourned.